Hello and welcome back to the Done Deal YouTube channel, and today we're joined by Volkswagen's creme de la creme ID.4. It is the GTX Max. Now in this review we're going to be comparing it to the normal ID.4 as well as going for a drive, discussing range, charge times and everything in between. However, to give you a bit of a background, so the GTX Max, it carries the same 77 kilowatt hour battery as the ordinary ID.4, except instead of having 204 brake horsepower, it almost has 300. And that's achieved through having a second electric motor here to power the front wheels. It also has over 100 foot-pounds of torque more than the normal ID.4. So it should be quite fun to drive. But before we get into that, enjoy some cinematics and let us know if you can spot some of the differences between the ordinary ID.4 and the GTX model, and leave a comment below. Quickly, before we get into things, I'm going to show you a bit of an insight into what's to come. So here are 3 or 4 of my favourite things about the ID.4. First up on that list is there's something called travel assist. And what this does is it recognises the speed limits. Now a lot of cars do that, however it goes one step further. And basically if I'm driving along on the motorway with my cruise control at 120 kilometers per hour and the speed limit changes to 100, this will adjust the speed for you, and it doesn't slam on the brakes, it just slowly speeds down to it. Likewise, if the speed limit increases, it accelerates for you. Number 2 is the electric windows, and yes, my life is that boring that I find this exciting. However, if you look, there's only 2 buttons before windows and no ignition on. So when we turn on the ignition and we try it now, the rear should fold. But how do you put down the front ones, Dave? Well, you tap this haptic feedback button there and the front goes down. As you can see, a little bit temperamental, but that's all part of the fun. Number 3 is that it can be fitted with a 125 kilowatt charger, which means you can go from 10 to 80% in about 31 minutes. That's pretty cool. And best of all, you can actually get an ID.4. And I know that might seem quite unusual, but as you well know, with chip shortages, problems getting wiring looms, and soon to be problems with getting batteries, it can be quite hard to buy any car, never mind an electric car. However, Volkswagen have told me that your best chance of getting any of the electric cars is actually an ID.4. Better than the ID.3 and even better than the Skoda Enyaq. Now these are all really good, however you may have noticed that none of them were specific to the ID.4 GTX Max. They were actually more about the ID.4. And whilst the GTX Max is a fabulous car, it's cracking, I don't actually think you really need to go for it in the real world. Hear me out here. You see, the regular ID.4 has a starting price of about 53,000 euros, and because that's under 60,000 euros, the SCAI grant is available, which means on the road you're talking about 49,000 euros. The GTX, well, that starts at 64,000 euros, and this being the Max has an on-the-road price of 76,000 euros. So there's a big difference, and not being able to get the grant for the GTX definitely takes away from it. Not to mention the range is actually higher on the normal ID.4. So now seems like as good a time as ever to discuss the range. Well, the entry level version, which I think is the Life, that has a range of 514 kilometers, which is really impressive. Now that's WLTP, real world probably high 400s. The GTX Max, 464 kilometers, so quite a lot less, and in the real world you're probably going to see maybe 420 kilometers in this. I should definitely achieve 400 on this charge, so you're paying more and getting less. And very often for a lot of electric car consumers, particularly if it's the first time they've bought one, they're a little bit apprehensive. Definitely range really does come into play. Okay, so it's been a pretty stat heavy review, so now we're actually going to take a look at the real world things: boot size, comfort and what it's like to drive. And the first thing I'm going to do now is give you another stat: 543 litres, which is loads of milk, but it's actually also quite a practical boot. virtually no load lift there, a bit of storage in the sides. The seats fold in a 60-40 split. There's also this net that comes with it, which I don't think you'll really ever use. I do like that under here, there's a clever little place to store your charging cables, which is just nice. They have thought through that, which is quite efficient. Now, in terms of closing the boot, it is electronically closing. And actually, being a 76,000 euro car, let's do the sweeping foot test. Devastated. I'm determined to get this working. Come on. It did it once before. Rear space. It's pretty generous back here, to be fair to it. Absolutely tons of knee room and plenty of headroom, despite even having a panoramic sunroof. And actually, because it's fully electric, the floor there is flat, which is quite nice too. You also have an armrest for your drinks. There's also a ski hatch there, and then ISOFIX points, really easily accessible. And actually, if you've 3 kids, there's plenty of room for you here, as there's another ISOFIX point on the front seat. Now, I would get out, but I've got child locks on, so I'm gonna figure a way out of here, and then we'll do the front. Now, this I actually think is the most crucial part of any car review, because this is where you're gonna spend your time. Now, the coolest thing about it is it actually starts up on its own, and it will continue that as you go to drive it. And I'm not just talking about the lane assist it has. It does a lot more, and we'll get to that in a minute. So you hop in and it turns on. There is a button here if you want to override that. And here on this car, we've got a 12-inch screen. Now, the normal car comes with a 10-inch. It perfectly suffices. It's completely customizable. You'll see I have blue lights going along. You can change those colors to 30 different colors. It's really impressive. It's almost like color grading a video. Now, the seat, these GTX seats are so comfortable. They've got leg extensions, which I have no need for, but they're nice to have. Armrests here, either side. They are really, really comfortable, and they can be more comfortable because they also have a massage feature, which is quite crazy. Then in terms of storage, buckets of storage. I've got 2 drinks in here right now. There's more drink holders, wireless phone charging, drink holders here. You can also take this out. It's just so practical. There's even more down there, USB-C charging points, and then I haven't even got over to the glove box. So yeah, in terms of storage, you're not shy of anything. And as a whole, the fit and finish in here is very Volkswagen ID. If you've been in the new ID.4, which is coming out, or is probably out by the time this video goes live, or the ID.3, it is very familiar. Another thing to note is this infotainment system. When we had it at the beginning in the Golf, and then the Seat Leon, and then across the rest of the range, it was causing a little bit of issues, and I've had none so far. And it does have the system called 3.0. I think 3.1 is coming in the next week or 2, and that will be updated over the air like your phone updates. And that comes with some cool upgrades. It should work a little bit more seamlessly, but one of the most noticeable changes is when you are driving and you put on your indicator, it will actually change lane for you, which is quite cool on the motorway. But yeah, as I said, the whole thing in here is really nice. All the materials you touch are very premium. Even this dash here, it's a weird kind of navy bluey color. But yeah, it's absolutely lovely in here. Don't want to distract you too much longer. I think it's better off just going for a drive. So to drive the ID.4, whether it's the GTX or the ordinary one, is very electric car-like. It's really quiet, it's very smooth, and of course you've got all the creature comforts. However, the ID.4 GTX Max, let's talk about that first because that's what we're in. Day to day, it actually drives around in rear-wheel drive like it would in the normal ID.4, and it's only when it's fighting for traction or maybe you need a little bit more power that it applies it to the front wheels, and that's obviously the 4-wheel drive and the 2 electric motors kicking in. And to be fair, it is really good in the bends. It certainly fills you with confidence that it's gripping really well and it's staying hunkered down on all 4, which is a great thing. And on top of that, the power is really good. As we said, 299 brake horsepower, and it definitely does knock you back into your seat. Now, it's not as quick as something like a Tesla or even the Volvo XC40 Recharge. It's not blisteringly quick, but it is fast. I think it's 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 6 seconds. Then day to day, let's take a normal ID.4. What is it like to drive? Well, it's very smooth, as I said before. Things that are nice creature comforts are the screen is easy to see here. This particular one's got an augmented digital display up in front which shows your speed, and also when the sat nav is on, it will tell you to take the corners. It's quite cool, very difficult to show on camera though. In terms of the ride quality, you'll see this across all of the Volkswagen ID range. It's really, really smooth. Now you can adjust things here in your modes, and there's everything from eco, which is where I've left it because it is an electric car and I tend to leave it there, to comfort, sport, traction, and then individual, where you set it up as you like. But it is very, very smooth. This particular car has dynamic chassis control, which means it can adapt the dampening and kind of improve it if you do want to drive it a little bit more aggressively, which is nice to have in a GTX version, although you don't need it in the regular ID.4, I don't think. Then in terms of efficiency, that's always quite important to take note of. So it's actually pretty decent, despite being the GTX having a little bit more power, and this also being a press car, tends to get driven a little bit harder, but the long-term range is about 18.6 kilowatt hours for every 100 kilometers, which isn't terrible. I'd say in the normal ID.4, in normal driving with a little bit of city, you should see closer to the early teens, which is pretty good actually. And this is summer, it's worth noting. In the winter that won't be as good. What I do want to talk about is I've driven this car a lot this week. I've been up and down to Kildare, I've been down to Portlaoise, and I've been in and around Dublin, all nearly motorway driving, and I am averaging that 18.6 kilowatt hours, which is pretty decent to be fair. And I haven't had to charge it. I don't own a home charger, I've no way to charge it up at home, and I still have 130 odd kilometers left in the tank of electricity, which isn't bad at all now, to be fair. That said, I've got a long drive later today and I am thinking, where am I going to charge this up? But as I said, if you have a home charger, these problems completely go away. Another cool thing I do want to point out in this car is it's got some acoustic extra glass. I'm not really describing it very well, but it just means it's particularly silent in here, which is lovely. So as a whole, really nice to drive. The cockpit's a very similar fit out to the rest of the ID cars, and it is very comfortable. So it drives well, it looks well. Now, which one do you go for? Well, it comes in so many different specs, from life to business to family to max. There's just so much. My advice would be hit the link up there, find out where your local dealership is, go down, go for a test drive and see what you think. Now, I have to say, if you do have the money and you do really like the GTX, you won't be disappointed. It's a fabulous car, but don't think that if you get an ordinary ID.4 that it's any way inferior, because other than the four-wheel drive and a little bit of extra power and a few other bells and whistles, the ordinary ID.4 is brilliant in itself too. Now, what are the competitors? Well, obviously there's the Enyaq, which in my opinion actually looks maybe a little bit better. And then of course there's all the different ones. I won't mention the T word, but I will say that the infrastructure for charging is potentially better in the Teslas. So if you're doing a lot of driving, maybe that's worth considering. And then another dark horse I previously mentioned in the video is the Volvo XC40 Recharge, the twin motor one of those, 400 brake horsepower. It's brilliant to drive as well, so definitely go test drive. But what I will say is you won't be disappointed with the ID.4. And actually, to give you one last stat, at the point of filming this, over 1,100 people have bought them in Ireland this year alone, and we're only in June. Now, that said, I suspect the numbers could have been higher if the supply was higher. So anyway, let us know what you thought of the review. Hopefully you did enjoy it. If you did, please subscribe. Make sure to comment below and hit the bell icon so you get notified every time we upload a new review. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.